Well, back in the 90s, everything was crazy and dangerous, and luckily I was still in a warm island back then. But since a couple years ago, it's not really as much police, but it's called gentrification is a good word for it. A lot of poorer places have been upturned into a lot of buildings have been knocked down, a lot of buildings, and from the buildings to make new businesses, new condos, new this. So a lot of places like Harlem, a lot of tourists, or a lot of every non-New Yorker person I know thinks Harlem is one of the worst places in the world. A lot of places like that is extremely good now, education is good, everything's good. And even I live in the Bronx, around 15 minutes away from Yankee Stadium. Even places like that is much better than it was back in the 90s. Even the people themselves, I'd say, compared to the people back in the 90s, there's not as much outright gunfights going on. There's not as much violence as there was before. There's still violence, but that's all around the world. So I'd say in New York, there probably is still a little bit more places where you don't want to go in past midnight, but there's not as much as there were back then. A lot of places are new. A lot of education is different now. A lot of bad high schools have been upturned and split into little mini high schools. So there's been a lot towards violence and everything. But economy, it's my school is 8 hours away, so every time I go home back to New York City, for some reason everything's more expensive and then everything's getting cut. I have no idea why, but library funds get cut, this gets cut, this gets cut, and everybody blames everybody kind of thing. So upstate, they blame New York City. New York City, I don't know who they blame, but they're blaming somebody. So everything's a little bit different.